Alright, hello everybody, this is Antonio Wolf. Going on a little bit of a hike today. It's been a while. Gone on a few hikes, but haven't really taken any videos, or when I've tried, they haven't been worth posting, quite frankly. My mind blinks quite a lot when I start the camera rolling, which is very annoying, because when it's off, I got plenty to say. Just once it gets rolling, my mind blinks. So, what's been up? Well, as you can tell, not much has been up. A few logs have come out. I actually have quite a few more on the way, mainly because those were already mostly finished stuff that after years of just languishing in the background of my blog, I finally taken a look at and finished. So you'll see more of those. Unfortunately, I had a thought that I would finish some videos during December. Those videos did not turn out the way I wanted, so I scrapped the idea for now. The video I wanted to make on the Article of God, it just does not verbally work. It does not work as a read piece. It's too dense and technical, which is more appropriate to a written piece, which you can read at your own leisure and reread at your own leisure, or as something you listen to. Sure, you can rewind and all that stuff, but something verbal ought to roll a bit better, flow a bit better than something technical. So I scrapped that. Same thing, I had an idea for an article of freedom that I might have published on, well, I wanted to publish on the New Year's Eve, and that too ended up going nowhere. Same problem, too technical, does not read very well when spoken. So I'll have to rewrite those for a verbal purpose eventually. Whoa.
Thank you. One more.
Are you good? Mountain bikers doing their thing. I've actually thought about it. It looks very fun. I mean, I like walking, I like talking, and I like seeing new places, and you can only walk so far. So definitely you can go quite a bit farther on a bicycle. Of course, the easy part's going down, the hard part is going up. But it can't be that much harder than actually walking when you think about it. Especially the places that are designed for that. And a lot of these places, like a lot of these trails, are actually quite nice. So places like this are quite nicer. So yeah, those videos scrapped. Who knows when I'll make a proper written version or script that goes along with a video. Because those are very important topics in philosophy in general. And I want to do them justice as a video. Perhaps even finally a proper video essay with moving film. But who knows? Other than that, you can tell that I've been having a little bit of fun on the internet, posting a few of my Discord spats with fools. You know, nothing important. It's just stuff that might amuse you. Certainly amuses me while I'm going through it, so why not post it? Connected with that, There's some stuff that I might do, I am doing related to that, but not for the purposes of those videos. I've been trying to formalize some arguments on positions that come out of Hegelian philosophy, but obviously if you're going to formalize something, it's not a Hegelian argument. So, and also, you can't expect something formal to actually be convincing in an absolute sense. Anybody can deny whatever propositions you put forth, and you say, well, I disagree. And because propositions are very complex things. And which way am I going? Let's go this way. I think, unless it goes back up, in which case we're not going that way. There's a certain path here that, that seems to go right back up. Can't be the way I'm going. Ah, yes, that bridge over there. And if you can see it, there you go. Now you can see it. That's where I'm heading, so going down. And it's a bit chilly. It rained yesterday, as you can see from those beautiful clouds. Beautiful clear sky. And you can probably tell that the ground's a little bit wet. Give me a second to adjust it on my hand here. The selfie stick is not the most comfortable one. The last one that I had was quite nice, very comfortable compared to this one. Unfortunately, that style for some reason is not produced anymore. So I gotta deal with this uncomfortable thing, for now anyways. Where was I going? Formal arguments. Ah yes, anybody who is intelligent will be able to just realize, well, I can just deny the proposition and substitute my own. Or, they can run a skeptical gauntlet on you, in which case, necessarily they will be able to win if they know how to be skeptical properly. Not everybody does. Everybody thinks that you can just ask why and get away with it scot-free. Well, you can't. You still have to have some reasonable motivation for your doubts. So, the formality argument is mainly for the purpose of presentation towards unphilosophical people, or people who are philosophically open and who are not stupid or insane. So I may go over those in a little bit. Other stuff ongoing. Life updates. I should go back to work soon. Probably within a month and a half at most, really. I don't have any money pressures, but you never want to go too low on money. I always like to keep a decent enough savings just in case, even though, with those just in cases, anything at all will wipe out just about anything you have. So, it's more for minor emergencies. Real emergencies, nothing can save your ass. Still don't know exactly what I want to do regarding that. Probably will be trucking again, just because, I got the license. It pays more than what I was doing before, generally. I just want to get something that leaves me some time. It's local and then leaves you some time to do my thing. Nice view right there. So once that happens, of course, I will not have that much free time, but hopefully the plan is I should have weekends. Weekends are nice. So we'll see. I'll see how that goes. Kind of dreading the possibility I might get something year-round, but who knows? I've never had a year-round job, so that's the scary thing. Just because I've never had one, I've never done that thing. I've been working seasonally basically since I started working. Since my first job. It was either tied to the school season, or it was tied to the fruit season up to now. So with those things, I've always had at least either quite a bit of time, like in my first job. It was technically part-time, not even full-time, 6-7 hours a day, 5 days a week plus weekends, so I had plenty of time to do whatever I wanted, but not that much money. And then with seasonal fruit work, packing house work, during the season you got no time, but after season you got all the time, which is quite nice. But at the same time, as you can see, usually I don't use my time. Usually I don't use my time very wisely, and that's a lack of discipline on my part. I can't blame anybody else for that. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. For the stuff that's going on, I've tried to make a video commenting on certain things ongoing in the world, but the things that I have to say are just kind of either everybody already knows, it's trivial, or they're kind of a very hot, controversial thing, and I really don't want to get involved in something like that just yet. One has to pick one's battles, and I don't consider those battles to be the ones which are hills that I want to die on for the moment. There's other people who are more than capable than I am to manage these things on a messaging level than me. So I will let them take that heat. They're used to it. That's their game. Politics is not mine. Nonetheless, a short comment so that people may think that I'm some kind of callous person who doesn't really, pay attention to the world. I do pay attention to the world, not because I want to, quite frankly. Generally, I stay away from politics and news just because, well, what the hell can I do? I get as righteously angry as other people, and feel disempowered and would like to change things, but the reality is I am not really going to be engaging in anything that actually changes anything. Arguing with people on the internet does not solve anything, so I'm not going to waste my time doing that. I'm also not going to waste my time being angry all the time. That in itself is not just a drag on you. It's an unhealthy thing. There are people who actually want you to be angry 24/7 as much as they can, because angry people don't think very well. They don't pay attention to how things really are, and so they're much easier to manipulate on things. So it's just not generally good for your health. So one has to focus one's energies more wisely than just going along with what the current hysteria might be, even if it is justified. I mean, if you're going to actually do something, do it. But, internet posturing is not one of those things. what else is going on? Well, yeah, to comment on that, I'm definitely pro-Palestine. If you follow my Twitter, that is not news. I repost a thing or two on Palestine every day. Just for the purpose of, boosting algorithm awareness of certain things, even though, they're already kind of well known. I get them through the algorithm. I don't really follow any general politics stuff besides some very small channels, but even then, things get boring after a while. It is the same old, things aren't changing, but things are moving, things are developing insofar as things change. If they are that important, I will become aware of them, and if I can do something about them, I will. So, moving on from that. I can discuss some stuff about some interesting discussions, I suppose. And I was kind of regretting earlier, once I started this, I got out of my car to walk here, and it was a bit chilly, and I was like, damn it, I knew I should have brought my jacket. But then I thought, well, when you start walking, you start warming up, and indeed I am warming up already. I mean, I'm just wearing a sweater, and I'm sweating, and it feels nice. This is like a perfect temperature in which it's not too hot, not too cold. Insofar as you start feeling hot, you start feeling the coolness right away. So, beautiful day. So, let's see, what else? So I had a short discussion with somebody a couple days ago, in which they're a younger man, probably very early in his university education, and they messaged me and they asked for some advice, and telling me, well, this Hegel stuff, everybody else tells me it's kind of important, he's like, I'm into Marxism a little bit, it's like Adorno, Frankfurt School kind of stuff. And I said, but I'm not really feeling it, man. I'm not really seeing the relevance, and besides, it's just such a big commitment, and one has to worry. What if I'm kind of committing myself to a giant waste of time? What if I just look more generally at things? That way I'm not boxed in my worldview. Reasonable concerns, given the current age we live in. My response to them was actually quite simple. I mean, it's a thing that I talk about quite a bit whenever anybody asks me about this stuff. You have to consider why you're engaging something. If what you're engaging does not call to you, does not interest you at all, then just move on. It's that simple. You got better things to do in your life. Don't waste your time following the advice of people who tell you, look, this thing's really good, you need to go see it. And if you spend like 20 minutes on it and it's just not clicking for you, go ahead. Throw it out. You got better things to do with your life. The reality of the 20 minutes is nothing. But 20 minutes compared to spending 20 hours on a book, that at the end you're like, well, I did it, I read it. It's like watching reviews of books by people who were like, well, I read Moby Dick. I didn't get what it was about. I didn't like it, but I read it. I'm going through the literary canon, I read it. That's just such a pointless way to go through life. If something doesn't catch you very quickly, just go ahead and dismiss it. Don't dismiss it in the sense of like, oh, I know that's a piece of shit. No, admit to yourself, I don't know, but you know what? I don't care. It's that simple. It's like me and Deleuze. I cannot stand that motherfucker's writing style. But I'm not going to tell you, hey, Deleuze is a piece of shit. He's a moron. Don't go read Deleuze. I don't know what the fuck Deleuze really says. I haven't bothered reading him, and I'm not about to bother reading him. Everybody who's tried to get me to read him, I've tried. It doesn't catch my attention, so it's not my thing. I'll just move along, do my thing, the things that actually interest me. And for anybody who is Deleuze, for whom the thing is Deleuze, great for them. They can make positive use of it. I can't. It's that easy. And I had a little bit of a dispute with them, mainly because, they said, look, some of the things I just can't agree with Hegel on. Things like, God and Christianity. And he says, I'm not convinced, that Jesus Christ was literally like God's son or something. And he's like, how can you improve that? And I told him, if you think that the issue is going to be empirical proof, you don't understand what God is. And he says, no, I understand what God is. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't understand what God is. Because if you understood, you would have no issue with what Hegel's talking about. It's not a matter of empirical evidence. No amount of empirical records at all will ever prove to you anything divine. It's a metaphysical consideration. That's it. Insofar as there is a concept and a thing fits the concept, guess what? It's a thing. If what I know an apple to be, and I see something that fits what I know an apple to be, well, guess what? It's a fucking apple. That simple. It's a simple logical understanding. There is no mismatch possible in this scenario. Either a thing fits the bill or it doesn't fit the bill. Any doubts about that have to be doubts about fitting the bill or doubts about the concept. And the fitting the bill thing is, I got some empirical object. I'm looking at what's said about it. Does it fit? Does it not? That's it. Or I'm looking at it directly, and does it fit? Does it not? That's it. There's nothing advanced about this, quite frankly. So once you get it, it's quite easy. But he was adamant, no, I understand it. It's just I don't believe that Jesus is like God. And he's like, and I don't think God's a person. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because you don't get it. But it's okay. You don't have to get it. You don't have to be a Hegelian. You don't have to be a Christian. You just have to be true. True to who you are. You can't be true to anything else, really. And who you are is part of the truth, part of the whole. So, follow your passions, do your thing, be true to them, as much as you can consciously be. The only real error that you're going to commit in your life is willful ignorance. It's much better to be wrong, but be wholeheartedly wrong, than to be some lukewarm person who never does anything because you're afraid to be wrong, which means that you're also afraid to be right. Hegel says the fear of falsehood is really the fear of truth and skepticism. So, as with any things, don't engage in things. Don't waste your life with things that you really have no passion for. Be a good Marxist, be a good Christian, be a good Hindu, be a good Muslim, be a good person, and that's it. That's really all that's asked of you. And to be good, everybody has some intuition about what it is to be good. There's nobody that does not, really. Actually, this kind of segues nicely into those issues now, don't they? So in these formal arguments that I have about objective morality, if you ever try to formalize things and you're not stupid, yes, I'm saying that, you're going to realize it's a bitch. There's a big problem in which to make any arguments, you got to make a series of arguments. And you can never really stop it. Like, oh, well, this is actually just a solid 5-argument piece. That's it. No, anybody else can always come in and add in some gap in between about what you're doing, for which you have to give a further argument. So the question is, well, how much of an argument do you generally need to cover the usual questions that people have? Because you can never formalize the whole thing. A lot of it is going to be a contextual thing of on-the-spot dialoguing. So, and if you know what you're talking about, you won't be able to, well, you won't not be able to, generate an argument according to the context. So, you're fine, you're good. And to be convincing is a different issue. Convincing in a formal way is actually not possible, because if you have a genuine dispute with somebody in which they do not agree on the object to be cognized and some objectivity about it, they can just go ahead and obnoxiously keep demanding why, without specifying what the problem actually is, because they have to offer something positive in return to tell you, well, the reason I have a problem is because of X problem, and then you can problematize what their problem is likewise. And those things, well, if you're going to go on that round trip and you realize it, you're just going to stop the whole stupid train and break it down and go, okay, let's go to the ground. Let's discuss what is rational in and of itself, what is reason, and why reason matters. And if this person just goes, well, it's a subjective thing, well, conversation's done. You can't talk to idiots. You can't talk to the unphilosophical about the philosophical. You can't expect truth to be grasped by somebody who already puts himself in a position of falsehood and then pretends that they can judge the truth from falsehood. It's nonsensical. So there's that. So what are these arguments? They're arguments that try to take common sense views and to lead them up through some reasoning to some transcendental positions about ontology, particularly in just the general categories of morality. So one of them is that goodness automatically belongs in the domain of being. Whatever one may say is good, obviously we always desire good things. Somebody may verbally dispute this, but you cannot actually conceptually dispute this. Every person, even the person who says, no, I actually want bad things, that person may understand and recognize, representationally, as a matter of the discourse of other people, that something is or is not good. And therefore they may verbally affirm, I like bad things. I want to do bad things. But in their actual intuition of goodness, that is not what they're actually doing. The reason they seek these bad things is because these bad things to them are good. Even on the minimal level, this person says, well, I realize that there are drugs lead to self-destruction, but you know what? I love the high. Pleasure is the only thing that matters to me, and so if the price of pleasure is the destruction of the body and the mind, well, I will seek that. And so this person is not affirming, oh, I want bad things. This person is affirming, no. Out of all these things, the only real thing, the only thing that actually matters, and which anyone rational in my position would go after, is pleasure. So of course I'm going to sacrifice the fictitious things like the body and health and all these other things for pleasure, the immediacy of pleasure, and thereby they affirm that everything they do is for the sake of the immediacy of pleasure, You know, the act, all things are mediated actions instrumental towards that end, and that end is a good in itself. You know, if I could just have that on its own purely, instantaneously, I would, and that would be perfection for these people. You know, the eternal high in which, you know, you never come down. And if there was some way to maintain that, they would do it. So every pursuit of pleasure is a pursuit towards some kind of being, because it's a matter of something that is, and a maintenance of that being, and a furtherance of that being, if it's possible, an increase of it. Nobody actually genuinely believes that goodness belongs to non-being, because non-being isn't anything, you know, and a non-being is not efficacious. It does not have potential. It does not drive anything. It does not pull anything along as a purpose. Otherwise, it would be, and it would not be nothing. You know, it's an easy contradiction. So even the person who says, look, I hate this world. I hate everything in it. You know, I think if I had the Thanatos glove and I could just like snap my finger and have everything reduced to nothing, I would. Well, this person isn't really affirming, oh, like nothingness is actually good. No, what this person is affirming that there is something about existent reality as it is that is lacking, that is imperfect, and that, you know, the true being of things is nothingness. You know, that this world of experience, all this pain, all these other things, they are the actual nothing. The true being is what we normally would call nothing. It's like the Gnostic position, in which, you know, the material world is evil. The world of the senses is evil. The world of experience is evil. You know, the true being appears to us from this side as nothing. But, you know, it is the truth. It is the one thing that, you know, really is, whereas all this is nothing but an illusion, you know, by the demiurge. Because if a person affirms, look, the way things ought to be is nothing, is that they should not be at all, well, there's a problem. How come it's here in the first place? That's one. How come there's anything at all? Number two is, why haven't you killed yourself? Number three is, if it is actually non-being, why does it need you to be efficacious? Why hasn't it brought itself about? Because unlike non-being, goodness, in the Hegelian sense, already is. So, you know, it brings itself about because it is in the domain of being and overarches the domain of being, is immanent to it, and also transcendent of the immediacy of being. So, you know, anything that changes in this world, the development of trees, the cycles of air, carbon, all these other things, all of those things are bringing themselves about by the fact of their being, which is the seeking of themselves, which is goodness, the maintenance of being. You know, what do we consider evil generally? Evil is destruction, is non-being. It is taking that something which is and ought to be and interfering with it from outside and bringing it to ruin when actually it plays some other role, not only in itself, but it plays a role in other things. So, you know, anything desired and anything which is automatically genuinely considered when as good belongs to being. It's not a non-being thing. That's one or two arguments, really. Another argument is that the normative aspect of morality, of good and of goodness, also belongs to being. The way we speak of the ought and what things ought to be is in a sense in which it belongs to what they really are. You know, somebody tells you that a sapling they give you is an apple tree, and you buy it, and you plant it, and you're like, well, you know, 5 years later I'm going to have some apples. And well, time comes and it flowers, and it kind of looked like an apple, but it ends up being some other kind of fruit. And, you know, you kind of get angry and pissed, and you're like, well, this ought to have been an apple. You know, it should have been an apple tree. It's something else. You know, given what an apple tree is, given how it develops, this looked enough like an apple tree that up to this point, you know, I was expecting apples, but you know, it gets to a point in which like it flowers and it fruits and it ain't apples. And it's at that point you're like, oh, that ain't right. You know, this ought to have been apples, not whatever else it was. How do we make these judgments? All ought judgments really are grounded in some known thing and as to what it is. That's how these ought judgments work. And they are regarding moments of that thing. That insofar as it is, there's something consequent to the way that it is. If a thing is actually a seed from Earth, for example, from a certain region, you know, so say Sub-Sahara, and it grows in those conditions, I should be able to take that seed, plant it in the proper conditions, give it the growth conditions, and it should grow. It ought to grow, because that's what a seed is. It is that which grows into some kind of plant. It does not remain a seed. It may be a bad seed, or it might not be a seed at all. But it certainly ought to become what it already is in potential. You know, this is different. This is a sort of fact. One could call it a fact-based judgment about what is and what ought to be, where the potential belongs already to what the thing already is. The potential isn't some hypothetical. The potential is already actually real as potential, and is moving itself as potential to the actual. Whereas, for example, in some kind of hypothetical ought, you know, in the sense that you say, well, I'd like to go to a concert of so-and-so, and then you say, well, if you want to go to that concert, then you ought to go buy the tickets. You know, that's given the fact that if I actually want that, then the wanting has the consequence of getting me to actually buy those tickets. Or, you know, if I want a sandwich, I will actually make a sandwich. So I ought to make a sandwich. But with hypotheticals, people don't pay attention to this because they are pretty vague. They're not very well detailed, neither in our conscious judgments nor are in our unconscious judgments. You know, it's a very simple, abstract if ought. You know, if this holds, then there is not. Towards which, you know, if it is what it is, it will become that. So that kind of argument leads to the conclusion that whatever the ought is, which is a conception linked to the good, the ought is the good which is not yet, but will be. But it will not just be happenstance, it will be necessarily, which is why it should be. And this is why people hold the ought as linked to some kind of truer being. You know, that when we say, well, things ought to be this way, what we're implying is if the conditions of reality were true entirely, this thing also would be true to its nature, but they're not. There's some kind of imperfection going on so that, you know, true being cannot be achieved, so that some kind of imperfection is being injected by contingencies and other things that is halting this thing from progressing to its consequence. So the ought, just like the good, belongs to the domain of being. So, you know, this also goes along with the argument against the non-being or non-being in general being good or being the ought of anything. Because here the ought, as you can see, it's already an imminent potential that is actual and is already moving towards actualization in being itself, such that it already belongs to the domain of being. If it did not, then it belongs to the domain of being and is efficacious because it's moving already to realize itself. If the art was nothing, then what would be happening is that the nothing would be efficacious, but the nothing is by definition not in the domain of being. So how can it be efficacious upon being? It can't. So the nothing cannot be the art of anything. It cannot be that which drives or pulls anything to some kind of realization of nothingness. And everything that we experience tells us completely, otherwise. Otherwise to the idea that the nothing is what things are driving towards. We see a world in which things are alive. We see a world in which even minerals constitute themselves. The stars maintain themselves. Galaxies live and die. But there is no nothingness. There is a constant process of becoming into being and out of being for finite things. But the process itself doesn't seem to come and go, but just is. So that concerns parts of the arguments for the unity of goodness, or rather the way that goodness and the odd belong to the domain of being. There is another way in which goodness and being have to be identified in some manner, but this comes through an argument on value. For example, starting from the existence of ourselves, we are already living, desiring beings. We have biological desires, we have psychological desires, and we have rational desires. And in each instance, the immediacy that we experience is we enjoy our being and we want to maintain ourselves in our being. And we want to further that being as much as is possible. So, for example, let me switch my hand here. Ooh, that feels tense, a little bit cramped. So, for example, nobody comes with the positive desire to die. The vast majority of people who are depressed because there is a positive desire for an indeterminate something that they know not what. It has not appeared in their life and they don't know how to achieve it. There's just an unhappiness about a lack of being that is positively felt. It is not because they desire nothingness, but rather they despair at the nothingness that they live. In that, what they actually desire is if they could achieve this abstract happiness that they seek, if they could actually seek it out, if there was some manner for them to actually engage in activities that would realize this, they would, and then they would seek to maintain it and increase it if they could. All desire aims at its own satisfaction. No desire aims at dissatisfaction. Even people who are self-sabotaging, for example, take pleasure in the confirmation of their own belief that they are nothing, that they are worthless, and that nothing is ever going to work out. There are people who take positive pleasure and affirmation in their own failures to be this or that. They like being miserable. They like wallowing their sorrow. These people are actively engaging in activities that create, maintain, and even increase that state of being. And insofar, they don't want to die. But some of these people may actually go so far as dying in the pleasure of confirming how worthless they are and how right they are about themselves, because there is actually a rational pleasure in knowing that we are correct, and being right. Give me a second. Got something in my shoe. I don't know how. Hopefully that's it. Look at that beautiful sky. So, generally, what every living being wants to do, and particularly a human being in this case, is as a living being, we like to be alive, we take pleasure in maintaining ourselves alive. We want, and that's a unity of our own living being. If it was a disunity, we just fall apart and guess what, we're dead. We like to maintain and increase our psychological being, and we can just put that under the general category of happiness. So we like to be alive and we like to be happy, and we seek to be happy. We seek that unity of psychology, of emotion and self-representation, and then we like to be right. Every single person in the world loves to be right, so we seek some rational unity as well. Because insofar as we are wrong, nobody likes to be wrong. People are like, oh, I like when I'm shown wrong. No, you don't, motherfucker. No, you don't. But the thing is, some people can see beyond the immediacy of being wrong and can admit, well, yeah, I was wrong. It sucks, but at least now that I know I'm wrong, I can stop engaging in these wrong things. I can try something else, even if I don't know exactly what the good is. I know what it isn't, in this case. So, desire in general, valuation belongs to, it's a category of desiring. A value is that which we desire, positively. So, like I said, we can generally abstract this as happiness as such, for psychological being, where desire wants satisfaction. That is happiness for desire. And if desire cannot achieve satisfaction, you get depressed, very depressed. You begin to see no point in doing anything in the world because all your attempts are frustrated, and you feel the absence of your own being, and that's the kind of thing that leads people to kill themselves. For anybody who lacks desires and values at all, that person has no motivation to do anything. Even understanding. People pretend like, oh, well, you can just reason without motivation. No, reason is motivated. If you have no desires, and reason is itself a desire, then you wouldn't even reason. You would just be nothing. You would see no reason to engage anything. You would either be some robot, a slave, basically, to whoever else may take command and give you direction because you have none of your own, and that would be more of an existence of a hypnotic control by someone else rather than some agential life at all. That person would not be a person. It would not be a subject. They would not have a self, really. So the basicness of that is, without desires, without values, you come to nothing, and you are nothing. And it's not that you are led to become nothing. You were nothing to begin with. You are not a self-maintaining being, and you're gonna evanesce. A terrible snap. Let's see. There you go. You'll evanesce the moment you are, because that's what nothing is. So, what is this about? Well, that desire has the structure of being. Being is that which is, and being maintains itself as that which is. And then this is not using being as a Hegelian category. This is using being in the colloquial sense. Whatever is maintains itself in being. And there is a good understanding that the average person has that, of course, that which is and doesn't stop being. Which is why, people also have the intuition that whatever is true doesn't change. Whatever is true doesn't really deteriorate. True things cannot be corrupted. True things cannot fail to be. Because that is what truth is. Truth is being, really. That's what we're referring to. Truth is being in my cognition, in my knowledge. So, in desire, seeking a self-maintenance, it is engaging in its being, because whatever is for the sake of being itself and maintaining itself and increasing itself. You know, it's very much like the Spinoza and conatus. That all being has the drive to maintain itself and increase its own power to maintain itself. And every person who acts towards anything is engaging in this implicit logic. They don't have to say it, they don't even have to believe it. They don't have to be conscious about it. This is the fact of their action. And I was having a discussion with somebody who said, well, look, you can say that, but somebody else can say something else. And I'm like, yes, somebody else can say something else, I will admit to that. But from the standpoint that I'm talking about, it is consequent that even if a person claims to deny it, my claim remains true within the system that I'm putting forth, given the definitions that I'm using. And I'm trying to go from the everyday definition. He was saying, well, I don't think the everyday people actually intend this, which is, of course, itself a dispute, because I would say 100% they do intend this, absolutely. A regular rational person will agree with the things that I'm saying as, explications, if they can follow them and understand them, of their implicit commitments. Because it's there. And the reason he was saying, well, people can disagree and you say something else is because, well, what people specifically mean by goodness is going to be different. And then there are people who admit, they're like, well, I know that what I'm doing is bad. No, they don't. Again, they representationally believe, but intuitively, the way they feel their own being and the way they go with their own being, what they actually believe is that this thing that other people call bad is really good, and that anybody who's rational, anybody who really was seeking the truth and to truly be, would take the exact same action as they do, because that is what it takes to be. And obviously the point of being is to be, to maintain oneself, to increase oneself. So, to take actions against your own being is literally irrational. So all such a person would be doing is having a double talk moment in which they pretend to affirm the public opinion, but in fact they have an implicit, unstated position of their own, which is, no, the public is actually wrong. Because, true being does not belong to what the public says. True being belongs only to that which I say, and in this case it would be a selfish, self-preservation, that all beings belong, particularly from the standpoint of self-consciousness, to my self-consciousness. And if my self-consciousness is not around, then nothing else matters. Because the only thing that matters to me is me. And you know what? In my arguments, all those things, and here's one of the things about the arguments. The argument that I'm setting up has not even said what specific things goodness are. What specific things goodness is. It has only specified the structure of the general ontology of being, goodness, and desire and value, just to lay the groundwork of what will later necessarily count as good or not good, such that, the good old Socratic trick of get your opponents to admit to something regular and catch them in the consequences that something that they usually don't think about or maybe actually be explicitly against in their stated beliefs is going to be contradicted. So, for example, I would think that even the most selfish person would agree with what I've said about goodness, being, and value. In that, what's happening is, of course, I want to maintain my being. And of course, the only being that matters to me is me. So, why would I put anything else above me, especially if it decreased my being, if it brought me into some kind of disunity? Why should I choose justice if it's going to destroy me in some way? And that logic is right. Except with that exact logic, you can show this person, well, then your being is a lot more than you actually are aware of right now. That this person who claims to be acting towards the truth of being actually isn't. So that, you start problematizing these selfish concepts as being themselves irrational. And this person, of course, this is assuming that you're talking to somebody who wants to be rational, and everybody does, but not everybody is capable at all times, nor does everybody want to see. This brings me to another thing that I'm working on. And I've got 2 articles kind of like going over this. Might just be one public article, and the other one's more like a set of notes that will probably be used in the other one. I've talked about this quite a bit in other talks, walk-in talks. And that is that philosophy and rationality in general is not automatically available to people just because they have a brain. Not everybody thinks to the same degree. Not everybody can. Now, I'm of the opinion that the general problem is not so bad. The general problem is not that people can't. The general problem is that people won't. And this empirically looks very similar. Empirically, these 2 cases may be near indistinguishable. But the hopeful side of me just wants to believe that it really is a case in which people just don't want to see the truth. And why don't people want to see the truth? How is that possible? There's a famous set of passages from the Bible. They're primarily from, I think, Mark. Jesus is giving some parables and talking to his disciples, and they ask him, like, why do you talk to people in parables, like unlike us? And he says, look, for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, let them see and hear. And for those who don't, they don't. And Jesus says something brutal. He says, like, there are those, who hear but do not listen, do not understand, see, and yet, they don't see. Like, for example, well, look at all this. A person may physically see and yet not perceive what these really are. If you are an unthinking being, this camera, for example, we may say is like an eye that does not even see. It's a pure passive receptor, which is making a change of one physical state to another, which then reappears to us as images, as moving images. But the camera does not see anything. The camera, even if we made an organic camera, like modeled on an eye, and it worked that way, it would just be a biological computer. It too would not see. It sees and yet it does not see. It registers something about the physical world, and yet at the same time it does not. It is bizarre. It is a dialectical thing. It's a contradiction of performance. That something has the form and yet it doesn't have the content. And so, the reason Jesus used parables is a sort of way to, one, parables are quite simple, they're analogical, they require thinking. Stupid people do not understand analogies and metaphors. It's impossible. You need to think to understand such things. And if you don't think, you can hear without hearing. You hear but you don't hear. You see yet you don't see. You may read and you may not understand at all. what's the point of this? Part of that passage, he talks about quoting Elijah, in which, he specifically talks about the people who don't want to see the truth. And there's a part of the movie, The Passion of Christ, where Pontius Pilate talks with his wife, and he asks her, what is truth? His wife, Claudia, is in a room with him. He says, what is truth, Claudia? Like, can you hear it? Can you recognize it when it's spoken? And she says, yes, of course. Don't you? And he's confused, and he says, how? Can you tell me how? And she kneels down and looks straight at him, and she says, if you won't hear the truth, then nobody can tell you. And that's the kind of thing which back probably 7 years ago, 8 years ago, definitely a decade ago, would have made me laugh, if not made me angry. Because it is one of those things in which, like, it's like somebody's claiming special access to something. And they're putting a moral failure on you as if you're on purpose trying to not understand, and you're serious. You think you're sincere, and you feel you are sincere. And, all that happens to you there is like, look, this person's saying nonsense, and they're like, well, if you see, you see. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Sucks to be you. You're going to hell. And you're going to hell mainly because, really, if the reason, if you're not seeing, it's because, guess what? Deep down, you really don't want to see it. And you as a conscious, rational person cannot accept that, will not accept that. It's impossible. Because your experiences know that's not true. If you accepted such a claim, it would be because it made sense, but it doesn't make sense. And it's not that you don't want it to make sense, it just does not make sense at that point. And yet the sad thing is that Claudia is right. That after the fact of you understanding the truth, finally, and the understanding comes about by an opening, and we don't know how to open up that way. It's one of those things that is utterly impossible until you finally do it. And then you realize it was the easiest thing in the world. And yet before you do it, it is impossible, utterly impossible. It is not within the horizon of your own being. It does not enter your consciousness. It is not intelligible. It is not a possible object of experience. So when you hear something like that, it has to piss you off, necessarily. It has to piss you off. And why does it piss you off? Because you think that you're being sincere to truth. You really believe it. So how dare somebody come and tell you, you're actually you just don't want to know the truth. You're just being willfully ignorant. That's not the way you experience it. But the thing is, that is the way you are. That is the way I was. That's the way I think we all are, to more or less extent, about many things. And we don't realize it because we have prejudices. And those prejudices are so deeply ingrained, they are part of our very constitution, the very determination of our being. And we cannot see them because it's like seeing your own eye. You can't see your own eyeball. You may see it in a mirror, but these are always reflected things, and you always have thoughts about what an eyeball is based on many things and what seeing is. So when somebody comes to you with such phrases as, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. And if you don't get it, the reason is that you don't want to get it. But as you can see from the clips that I have posted, from the discussions I've had on the politics server, and I've had quite a few discussions. It's not that many. I mean, it's somewhere like a dozen. But they all mainly go that way. Ooh, that's a lot of birds. And that is that those people are obstinate. They are obstinate. But I understand that from their perspective, they are utterly convinced that they are right. They are utterly convinced that what they're saying makes sense, even when it doesn't. And that is the craziest thing. How can someone believe in nonsense? That's what these people think. They're like, how can you believe in God? It's a bunch of nonsense. What do you mean, like, there's a God? Where's the evidence? How can you believe in that nonsense? And yet these people are the same people who spout stupid shit. Like, oh, morality is relative and reality is just whatever I think it is. And there is no shared domain in which anything can actually be proven at all. And therefore, whatever you say is not true. And they don't understand the contradiction they're engaging. They don't understand that they are a contradiction, a walking contradiction, because everything that comes out of their mouth is against the very way that they exist. And it's just a pretension. It's nothing but empty word games. So what is the willful ignorance that is going on? The willful ignorance that is going on is that such a person pretends to be humble and yet is not actually humble at all. Skeptics are people say, like, how dare you have the hubris to say you know the truth? Nobody can know the truth. The truth, like, look, the world, it's just beyond us. Everything's beyond us. I was discussing with a guy who was telling me, like, you can't tell me what a tree actually is. And he says, because, what you give me is just a representation. I tell him, look, the tree is the thing that has a seed. It grows, matures, blah, 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 flowers, fruits, and has a certain life cycle. And he says, well, is that all there's to be said about a tree? Well, it depends. What kind of tree are you talking about? Is it an apple tree? We can say a little bit more. Are you talking about the tree in general? Well, yeah, that's generally all you're going to say about it. There really isn't that much more. What makes a tree is very limited specific things. And he says, but you can't give me those specifics. You can't give me every leaf. You can't give me every stem. You can't give me every cell. You can't give me every atom. And he says, nobody will ever do it. Nobody can do it. And, and according to that frame of mindset, he is absolutely certain. And he's absolutely certain that frame itself is the truth. And yet when you push him to the wall to explain how he knows this and why he's so certain, he can't explain. Nobody of that kind can explain. And it just becomes a belief, and they're like, well, it's just obvious. And he says, what it means to have absolute knowledge is to know, like, all the empirical details. Well, that's not what's being talked about. Why do you think that's what's being talked about? He's like, well, nothing else makes sense. Well, nothing else makes sense. Why? Nothing else makes sense because he wants his frame to be the measure of intelligibility. But he doesn't even know that. He's not humble, and he says, you're not humble. He tells me and tells other people in my group, and like, you guys are the ones who are not humble. Like, how can you say such things? How can you dare say you know anything? I'm like, well, do you know what you're saying? And he says, well, you fundamentally know. It's all opinions. And what business have you to tell me anything about truth? True humility is to be a student. True humility is not to go berating other people who tell you, look, I got the truth. I can tell you. And at the moment that they start speaking, you're like, no, that's not that way. You're wrong. Like the person I was having, I actually had a nice dialogue with somebody I was trying to explain the moral arguments to. Whoa. And they kept coming at me with that. And they're like, no, like, that's just not right. That's not what the average person means. And I said, no, that's not what they mean, like, in the sense of, like, what they say. It is what they mean in the sense of what they do. I'm going by what they do, not what they say. And he says, well, people can say otherwise. So what? People can be wrong. That's not a problem. It's never a problem. Because why? People are wrong in reality. It's a big, so what? Nice log right there. And it's a mindset in which you cannot win, but you cannot lose either. That person stuck in limbo. Actually, there was somebody, part of it is funny, part of it is depressing. And I've met, I think, about 3 people online who genuinely seem to have this position. in which they're like, I really don't know anything. And they're like, I like just listening to different views, and that's how I live my life. And they're like, and I'm like, you don't know anything? And they're like, yeah, I don't know anything. And I'm like, you sure about that? They're like, no, I'm not even sure about that. Like, I don't know how I exist. I don't know that I exist. I don't know that existence, is a meaningful thing. And that person, was kind of like, well, you guys seem so mean and you seem so sure of yourself. How? I'm like, well, you just told me you're not even sure about your own doubt. What are you doing questioning my certainty? You're not even certain about your own certainty. Or uncertainty, rather. You're uncertain about your uncertainty, which would be, properly speaking, a certainty about uncertainty. But you're not. Instead, you kind of go online and you just drift through the world. You have no personality, and they're like, yeah, that's kind of a problem. Some people tell me that, and they're like, it's like I'm kind of like a doormat of ideas. I don't really know anything specifically that I want to do or ought to do. To which the answer is, if you don't feel like it, then can't make you, now can I? I cannot give you desires. I cannot incept them in you. It's not possible. Ooh. We're almost at the top. I'll make it to the top, go a little bit further, and then head back. So, with those people, Hegel in his essay on philosophical criticism, which I read, and it's recorded here on the channel, check it out, recorded and commented on. I also have a nice little write-up summarizing it, but it's exclusive to the encyclopedia, which is not out yet, in which, don't waste your time talking to people like that. The only reason to talk to people like that is not for the purpose of having any discussion with them. It's not a discussion with them. They're not part of the discussion. So those people are literally stupid. And that's the only way to say it. They don't think. You can't be in that position if you think. But nonetheless, you don't need to think very much to be alive, quite frankly. Or rather, the issue is you don't have to believe in any thought to actually think, because people actually think. They actually live. These people have jobs. They know how to eat. They know how to maintain themselves generally. So it's no problem. The problem is that when it comes to abstract thinking, they no longer know what anything means not because they can't. And this is going back to the issue. People are willfully ignorant. They don't want to see the truth. And the problem is that they're already convinced that they know the truth. And they're not willing to let that go. They're not willing to get out of their own heads and get into somebody else's system, to just follow the thought along, not to question it. Just to go with the first jolt of meaning that you get out of it. It's not that hard. When I look at it, when I experience it, it's not that hard. It's not that I'm, you see those images like, memes of, that one lady, and it's kind of like deadpan, confused, and, like you see all the math equations in the background. That's not what's happening with me. Somebody says outside. Okay, I get that. I know what the outside is. Somebody says the outside of the outside. It's not hard. What's outside the outside? A little bit of thought. You're like, oh, well, outside the outside, categorically, is just the inside. But in the inside, suppose that there's other stuff inside the inside, or the walls outside, say the table inside. Yeah. And, but the table is inside the walls of the house. How is that? It's inside, but in being inside, it's outside. Because the relationship of insideness is the relationship of outsidedness. Until you get into the mindset of just going with meaning, all of this stuff seems impossible. All of it. Even the most simple things are impossible. And I understand. I really do. I understand that this is a radical thing. And I also understand why people are obstinate. Like I said, every person who is obstinate and refuses to believe that they could be wrong, because obviously they assume that they are right. It's that easy. It's that simple. That's the reason. I have a frame of mind. I understand the world in a certain way. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I see the way things are. I understand the world in a certain way. And I don't even pay attention that that's an understanding. That just is so obvious to me that it is unquestionable. And I refuse to question it. It's my ground. If I question it, everything falls apart. I can't. I really can't. Even the person who says, I doubt everything. I doubt even my own doubting. I'm not sure of anything. They actually refuse to question that, so they don't really doubt it. It's an unwillingness to go all the way. We're still a little bit off from the top. So fundamentally, I do think that Jesus in the Bible is right. I think that the fundamental reason really is that people refuse to see the truth. Obviously, they refuse on the basis that they believe that the truth that you're presenting is actually false. Even if they can't tell you immediately, the thing is they assume that they have the truth and you don't. And the truth that they have is unquestionable. For whatever reason, even if they had no reason, like they refuse to question it. They're unaware of it. And even if you make them aware of it, they refuse to see it because they just refuse to go along with meaning and its consequences. And I just have to believe that it is a refusal because logically it has to be. Logically, you're thinking. If a person understands how to walk straight, if a person understands how to go and order food at a restaurant, if a person understands how to, punch in at the job, how to greet other people, and how to, tell people, like, nah, I'm too busy today. I got other places to do. If you could understand that, you can think. You are thinking. You understand. You really do get it. A refusal happens insofar as the person really has no faith in their own thinking. They don't have faith that they understand. And no matter how much you tell them you do understand, it is that simple. They refuse and refuse to believe that it is as simple as you say. They want it to be more complex. They want it to be a certain way. They want the world to not make sense. They want the world to be magical in a way. And it's not about psychologizing, really. It's not that, really what's happening is these people just, they want to be mystified. No, they actually don't. Nobody wants to be mystified. Even the person who enjoys being mystified, what they enjoy is the knowledge of mystification. They want the certainty of mystification. It satisfies. There we go. Actually, we haven't made it to the top. But this is about as far as we're going to go. At least for right now. Let's go get a view. So, if you ever encounter people who are obnoxious, like the people I've been talking to, in that way, understand. Understand that, the first thing you ought to assume always, one, it is reasonable that they do that. Because it is. If there's a certain way the world makes sense, or a way that it's nonsense as nonsense makes sense as being essentially nonsense, that I could never know. It's beyond me. Somebody coming along and saying, hey, I got the truth and you're wrong, and, if you don't believe me, it's because you don't want to actually believe the truth. Obviously, that is an affront to your reason. Obviously, that is an insult to your capacity as a human being, as a person. So, the rational person's immediate response is, yeah, you're full of shit. And then, suppose, well, you want to convince that person. Well, you have to, especially if you're a beginner, you have to chalk it up. Well, look, I need to get better at communicating this stuff. It can make sense. Maybe I'm the typical, university student who is just too used to talking philosophical jargon, with my fellow students, but, I've never taught the normal person. I never thought about how to communicate this to a normal person. And then you try, and there are certain things that, yes, there are things that are simple and there are things that are complex. But, if you're going to talk to a normal person, obviously, don't bring up complex shit. Bring up simple things. Simple things are already complex enough. And then, try to explain them simply and try to explain them with everyday things. It is possible, absolutely possible. Even somebody like Bergson, even somebody like Deleuze, they got everyday examples. It's not all just like abstract gobbledygook. All abstract gobbledygook is inherent in everyday things. So you can bring that abstraction right into the everyday. That does require finesse. That requires you to do some thinking to figure out how to best communicate this, but it is possible. But there's a certain point at which, you understand, you can't get any more basic. You can't get more basic about nature than the outside of the outside. And if a person doesn't understand that, what are you going to do? Somebody tells you, I don't understand what you're saying. It's basic English. And yet I don't understand basic English. Can you make it easier? I mean, and all you got to do with that, is laugh, honestly. It's the kind of, laughter of the ridiculousness of the situation, because somebody's telling you, I understand basic English, and yet at the same time, I don't understand basic English. The way you're using the word is strange. And yet you tell me that you mean exactly what the average person does, and yet I can't see it. And the funny thing is that children get this kind of stuff. Children are the weird people who in this world who will ask you, well, what is being a being? What if nothing's? What is inside of the inside? What is outside of the outside? You ever thought about that? What's the north of the North Pole? What's south of the South Pole? Children are the only people who, think of those things. And of course, a child just says that. They're not really thinking about it. But they say things like that. But you can also get them to think about it. It's not that complex. At a certain point. Of course, once you get to the pure philosophy stuff, it's just thinking pure categories, pure semantics, and of course, a little representation so a rock is outside of a rock is not going to cut it. And at that point, that's the point at which one may start to make a distinction between somebody who refuses to understand and somebody who just actually can't understand. When it comes to the matter of actual thinking abstraction, this is a skill that needs to be developed. And if a person does not develop it by a certain point in their life, they are not about to develop that ever in their life. It's like language. If you don't teach a child language by the age of 4, the brain faculty, the part of the brain that is responsible for learning language, will deteriorate and will never regenerate again. So this person will be incapable of learning language ever. Likewise, this capacity of genuine abstract thinking is one in which will there be a significant number of people that just can't do it. They do not have the propensities. They don't really have the faculty for it at all. No matter at what point in their life you try to do it. Yeah, probably. But most people, I am certain, could actually develop this if you taught it to them early on in their life. It's a more linguistic approach to things. It's like what the Jews do. Jewish people are very known to be highly intellectual. Same thing, Brahmins in India. Highly intellectual people, very focused on abstract things. but it's a certain kind of abstraction as well. The Jews are more into the certain kind of abstraction I'm talking about. Brahmins are very doctrinal, very formal, and that kind of formal abstraction is not the kind of abstraction that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the semantic abstraction, the capacity to play around with meaning, with analogies, with metaphors. Those things require genuine thinking. Being able to take a bunch of things like, oh well, all these things look the same. They all fall into the category of an equine, a horse, some four-legged animal, whatever. Those things anybody can do. It's so basic. A child learns it, somewhere around like 4 or 5. Place things in categories, abstract universals, easy peasy. Everybody can do it. Not everybody can do this whole semantic thing, but most people can be engaged in thinking that. And the way you think that way is you have to be taught to problem solve. You have to be taught how to work with meaning. And obviously, you're not going to work from like, oh, let's talk about immediacy as such, kids. No, it's not a case of let's talk about Plato's allegory of the cave, kids. No, it's teaching kids practical problems in practical life. If you do practical problems, if you engage in practical problems, you're necessarily having to think. And especially if you are required to work out the solution yourself. If you don't do that, obviously there are problems in which you're not thinking. And so the faculty that's relevant to that is not going to be engaged, and it's not going to be developed. Puzzles, visual puzzles, just any issue. I wasn't a very inventive kid. I'm not going to pretend I was like trying to engineer stuff, whatever. No, I wasn't. I was not that creative. But I was creative in problem solving certain things in which, I wanted to draw. I learned how to draw. I wanted to, figure out how to play on emulators at a certain point. I figured out how to play on emulators. Figured out how to mess around with a computer. I figured out how to mess around with a computer. And I had to engage my thinking faculties to do that. And I did. And a lot of people, they'll be like, wow, I wish I knew how to do that. Well, why don't you look it up? I'm too lazy. It's just too complicated. I can't get it. People in many ways are taught to be self-defeating, in a lot of things, in which they really don't. A lot of things are not complicated. And I have faith that most people can do them. There are only some people, and they're the minority. I'm not, I think it's a significant minority, to be sure, but still the minority of people. The most people can actually do it. Now, does that mean that most people are going to be fucking philosophy level of thinkers? No. But it means that they can cognize some very basic shit. So that a significant amount of the population should always be very well aware, generally about, at the level that they're required to, about the reality of things. There should be no problem as to why people are confused about ethics and morality. There should be no problem about why they're confused about the government and the way economics works. There should be no such problem. All of these things are on a basic level intelligible, such that anybody who wants to think about them can think about them properly, even on a basic level. For advanced level stuff, of course, you have to do the work. There's a significant amount of work to be done to get yourself up to speed to be able to think about those things properly. But you can think about some basic stuff and you can be right. And you can be absolutely certain that you're right. No question. That little building you see right in the center, that's seems to be part of some kind of little mining thing. Well, this whole area is actually part of a dam system. And the dam is somewhere up there. I've actually never seen it, but apparently there's some trails here that go pretty deep into the hills here. And it's somewhere up there. But anyways, we've reached them at an hour. and 30 minutes. That went a bit longer than I expected. But I've kind of run out of what I wanted to say. So that's what I've been working on. I'll see about, getting as much done before I get to working again. No promises, as always. I work on bursts of passion, and when things get done, they get done. And they get done as I like them and I enjoy them. There's been some people commenting on the videos on the Discord debates. Don't take those too seriously. Don't take those recordings too seriously. They aren't serious debates. I consider like that server to be just basically a verbal shitposting server, and I have fun with it that way. I don't really get mad because people are stupid or anything. If I seem to get riled up, sometimes I yell over somebody. Well, it's mainly because one, I'm not riled up. I literally do not care about those people's opinions and whatnot. The yelling over each other part is mainly because I have moderation powers in my own rooms, but people don't appreciate just you muting them whenever you have a point to make against them. So like they try to shout over you until you shut up, and sometimes you do, and then sometimes you're like, nope, you're not gonna continue your point. I'm gonna yell over you until you shut up, and people actually prefer that generally over just being automatically shut up by the moderator and the other person just talking over you. One, because they generally, unless you're like literally looking, you don't pay attention that you've been muted or not, and the other person won't be hearing you anyways. So you want them to listen. So and the only way to get them to listen a lot of times is you just gotta yell over them. But beyond that, if I like shit talk or whatever, it's just that is shit posting. I don't have any personal animosity to such people. I don't care. I would hope they don't either. But it is true to say that a lot of these people are just plain stupid. Plain stupid, willfully ignorant. Definitely willfully ignorant in that, they have not done any due diligence in studying any of this stuff. They are not aware of philosophy in general. They haven't read the history of philosophy. All they've done is argue online with other idiots. They hang out with other idiots. And you know what they say? The company you keep says a lot about you and determines a lot about you. So my advice is surround yourself with intelligent and interesting people, and you will be an intelligent and interesting person. Because if you surround yourself with idiots, well, guess what you are? All right. That's been all for today. I'll see you around. Adios. Ah, yes. I have a Patreon. It's nice to receive some donations every once in a while. Think about it.